Welcome to the More Perfect Union, the podcast that offers real debate without the hate. And this is our special Grammy episode, sponsored by BetterHelp.com. I'm Kevin Kelton, your Grammy hostess with the mostess. And tonight I'm joined by Greg Matusak.
Thanks, Kevin. Are podcasts even available to be nominated for Grammys? And
oh yeah,
they are.
We got several nominations. We got Best New Podcast, Best Old Podcast, and Best Lousy Podcast.
Oh well, we should definitely get at least one of them. I'm pretty sure. I would like to have been nominated for at least like Polka too. But if you want, I'll just go boom check for the whole episode if that gets us there.
And of course, we're also here with Ward Anderson,
the Phil Collins of the More Perfect Union podcast.
Now, last week, who were you last week? I forget.
Sammy Hagar.
And this week you're the Phil Collins. Okay.
Is that Phil Collins of Genesis or Phil Collins of Def Leppard?
Of Genesis.
Okay.
I like to think of myself as the Billie Eilish of the show.
I think of you as the Billy Idol of the show.
Yeah.
And of course, it would not be the More Perfect Union podcast without our fourth microphone this week. Star of stage and screen, Ray Romano is joining us today. Classic comedian. Welcome, Ray. No.
He's just going to be a contrarian all day, isn't he?
No.
Why don't you say something nice?
No.
That's Ward doing his Ray Romano impression that he was treating us to before the show.
No.
So, Ray, it's officially 1 year into COVID, Ray. How do you feel about that?
No.
Yeah, so everybody this week is talking about the 1 year anniversary of the worst day in probably many of our lives. Well, 9/11, I suppose. But Europe is awash in outbreaks, and yet, apparently, according to some of the latest polls, 64% of Americans think the U.S. effort to contain the COVID crisis is going quite well. How do you feel about that, Greg Matusak?
I actually remember where I was a year ago. I just come back from a convention, and I come back on a plane. Everyone was talking about this new thing. I don't even remember if there was a name for it, maybe, but everyone was just talking, and there was like possible shutdowns. And like the day after I got back, it was like, shut it down. Everything's shutting down. And I remember I got home. I think I took a day off, and everything was gone. My kids weren't going to school. My wife wasn't going to work. I wasn't going to work. The world had changed. And now a year later, we're slowly integrating back. I'm thrilled with how things have changed, not so much in the year, but in the past month. That's the big difference.
I remember, listen, I was about to become a starter in my first NBA game. I was going to be a point guard. And it just hit me, I was dressed, I was suited up, I'm in the locker room, and then the announcement came.
Coach said, we're counting on you. We're counting on you, Kevin.
And I coughed, and they said, that's it, game over. So have you guys heard about this one woman who's not with the program anymore, doesn't want to wear her mask? We talked about mask burning parties last week. Apparently there was a woman arrested in Galveston, Texas, my new home state, at a bank because she didn't have a mask on.
It's such a weird time we live in when you get arrested at a bank for not wearing a mask.
Yeah, of course, they didn't get her for not having the mask on because it's illegal to arrest people for that. But if you are a private business and you have a dress code and somebody doesn't follow it, no shoes, no shirt, no service. If they say you have to have a mask and she refused to wear her mask, they can arrest you for trespassing.
Yeah.
And that's what they did.
Yeah, it's no different than going into a bar and ordering a drink and refusing to show your ID, but also refusing to leave, right?
Right.
Well, the ID at least is a state law. You have to show ID for a drink, and that's a state law.
Oh.
Ray,
I'm pretty sure it is. Ray, you're not a lawyer. But the thing that I really was comforted, and this is a video, is that everyone in the bank was like, "Yeah, get out of here, lady. What are you, crazy?" But even the police officer wasn't like, hey, these are the rules. You have to leave. But the last thing was, this was Texas. Remember, we all thought people in Texas were crazy, yourself included, Kevin.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, we all thought Abbott were like, okay, masks off. Let's start the burning. Full mouth kisses upon everyone leaving. But it turns out there is some common sense deep in the heart of Texas.
Well, in the blue areas, the mayor of Austin, Steve Adler, is trying to institute a mask mandate, even though the governor has insisted that they're illegal. I believe that's also happening in Houston and some other areas. And the state is now suing those areas to stop them from enforcing a mask mandate.
I think we're at that point now that many of us predicted. This time about 8 months ago or so, at least 6 months ago, several of us were saying the anti-mask people are going to look bad come spring, right? Come early 2021 at the latest. People are going to start to look bad. Everyone's going to take a turn. There was a time last June, I guess, maybe July, when it seemed that the mask and anti-mask people I knew were 50-50 almost. Now here we are. I hardly know anyone anti-mask anymore, right? I mean, they're still out there. I'm not saying they're not, and I don't know them.
There's a new strain. There's a new strain of it that I'm seeing online now in my Texas-based groups, which is they're anti-masks if you've been vaccinated. They don't believe you should still wear a mask. And I tried explaining to someone, you can still carry COVID or carry coronavirus, and you can still expel it into the air even if you've been vaccinated. And the reason that we all have to continue to wear masks and social distance is until we get to 70 or 80% full vaccines, which would then constitute herd immunity. People still need to follow those social medical health guidelines. And I'm telling you, there was at least one guy that I was in a discussion with this week, and actually several, they just dis-freaking agree.
So the funny thing about that is the people who were anti-mask had this whole thought that, look, the only people who are going to get sick are the old. So, right. Screw them. They're old. We're just.
They should stay home.
They should just stay home.
So the rest of us can live our lives.
Yeah, why are they crimping our style? Now that the elderly have got these vaccines, they're driving around in convertibles. They're hopped up on Viagra, whatever you crazy guys are doing. They're like, screw the young people. We've got the vaccine. We don't care what you guys do. We're going to go maskless and we may carry it. But you know what? You're tough. You're strong. You didn't care about us. So why should we care about you deep in the heart of Texas? And it's not that I love it because it's super irresponsible. I will be getting my second vaccine tomorrow. I will still be wearing a mask because I have a wife who hasn't had her vaccines yet. I have kids who haven't had their vaccines yet.
I'm impressed with the United States with their talk of, full vaccination by May and everything, because as much as I often praise Canada, the country in which I live, we are actually not doing really well as far as the vaccine rollout goes. We're doing worse than the United States, which is interesting because we were doing better than the United States when it came to infections and fatalities and mask mandates and wearing them. And right now you're looking at, they've doled out about 1.7 million vaccines, and fully vaccinated Canadians right now is sitting at about 280,000.
Ooh, that's low. That's low.
Yes.
Well, I just want to clarify something. I know what you meant. It might have come off to our listeners in a different way. What you meant is starting May 1st, everyone in the United States will be available to get the vaccine.
Yes.
They don't believe they'll have full vaccination until, I believe, July 4th is the target.
No, I meant availability.
Right.
Yeah. But I mean, I don't think we're even going to have that in Canada by then. I mean, we'll see. Stranger things, right? But that's one place where I've been really disappointed in Canada compared to the U.S. I often will talk about the differences between the two countries because, for the listeners who don't know, I do live in Canada, but I'm American, born and raised.
So you know what else I think is going to be an issue this year? Now, this doesn't affect so much you guys because your kids are so young, But for people who've got 17 and 18 and 19-year-olds, I think the competition for freshman college spots, I know it's way, way up. They're getting many more applications than they used to get or they were expecting to get. And one of the reasons, there's a couple of reasons for this. First of all, there's more competition for state schools because kids are figuring, why should I apply to some expensive private school 3,000 miles away when I may not even be able to go there and live on campus next semester? So they're applying to state schools that are closer to home. Also, the schools are now, most of them are not using SAT or ACT scores. So it's based purely on your high school academics and on your essay and your other extracurriculars. And high school grades may be inflated now because teachers are probably being a little bit more lenient with their students because of the difficulties of remote learning. So all that is going to make getting into college or getting into the college of your choice much more difficult this coming year.
So additionally, a lot of my students from years past, they told me they took a gap year this year. A lot of them were accepted to school or maybe they weren't accepted, but they decided that rather take this freshman year and where you're right, maybe they wouldn't attend and have that whole college experience. And yes, I'm using air quotes. They would take a year, work, spend time in their parents' basement, develop, themselves.
Start a podcast,
spend more time in their parents' basement.
So you're right. So now you have 2 years worth of high school seniors competing for the same 1 year's worth of freshman slots.
Yep. So fewer spots, more students. And these students have, like I said, all sorts of, they have life experience,
You know what's going to be the worst is to be a college admissions counselor and to have to read essay after essay after essay about what I learned in my 1 year of COVID isolation.
You know what? You could have just ended that at being a college admissions administrator. That job just sucks in general. Oh, my God.
I was going to say, I've known 2 college admission officers in my life, and they're just, they're like, I was like, how many times has your life been threatened? They're like, oh, many times. Many times. It's just like one of the worst jobs in the world, but they're paid well. And
well, you know what? Good for them, because it's a stupid fucking job. And I think that, college should be really easy to get into because it's, mostly stupid for, at least half of the time that you're there. I say this as someone who has a degree and got out in 4 years and got into law school and grad school and didn't attend. So this isn't coming from some anti-intellectual or whatever. I mean, I'm obviously smarter than most people.
And you've written 2 novels.
2 novels available wherever books are sold. 2 novels.
You mean they're not out of print, that you haven't been censored?
No, I haven't. And I know a lot of people are listening right now and they're going, is he being serious or joking? Does he really think he's smarter than everybody? Come on. Of course I think I'm smarter than everybody. But this is the thing.
Well, it goes with being handsomer.
Well, that's a given, right? But this is radio. People don't know how attractive I am. But trust me, listeners, very attractive.
He's so smart, he thinks we're on radio.
I actually think that college should be easier to get into. I find it interesting that we do this whole apply to college and maybe you'll get in and blah, 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 and da-da-da-da. Just let everybody get into college. You're paying to be there anyway, and the people that do poorly will fail out.
I agree with what you're saying, Ward, but one caveat, college is easy to get into if you open yourself up to community colleges as well.
True.
And I've thought for a long time that the idea of going to a 4-year private school and spending $250,000 to $300,000 is insane when you could get the same education at a 2-year community college, get your associate's degree. It'll cost you $20,000 to $40,000 for those 2 years. And then you go to, the 4-year institution of your choice as a junior.
What the problem is, and this is a totally different subject, and it's not for this show, but I'll just say it real quick and we can talk about it another time. But one of the biggest problems is, for some reason, and it really started with my generation, Generation X, Greg's generation as well. And that was that our parents put in our heads that we had to go to college. You had to go, you had to go, you had to go, you had to go. Right?
Oh, that was my generation too. Yeah.
It was to a point, but my point is because of this, this is one reason that America has, or North America, has the dropout rate that it has as far as universities goes. It has this student loan debt. It has all of that, where the focus should be on not just go to college or you're worthless. We need to focus on vocations, on tech school, on trade schools, things like that we used to focus on. That, like for me, I wish my parents had considered broadcasting school, but they didn't. And so I went to university and I had a miserable time, right? So that's one of my issues. And that's a completely different subject, and I'm sorry, but that's also why I get that way about the testing and all that. It's because we became obsessed over the past 40 years of college. And now what are we hearing about all the time? People getting out of college with tons of debt, no direction, no clue what they want to do, and no real skills.
Okay, now I'm going to jump in. One, standardized testing is not a horrible, horrible thing.
Greg, you ignorant slut.
And as far as vocational school, you're right. There should be a push for it, and there should be all those things. But we can't blame colleges. And you guys have unwrapped like 10 different things on there, and we're like, you're right. We should do an educational podcast, one special education episode.
Yeah, not a bad idea. Biden's approval rating is soaring, again, because I think Americans are very happy with the COVID relief bill that got passed solely by Democrats. And they're happy with the vaccine rollout, which is picking up steam. And even though we still only have about 10 to 12% of the country vaccinated, I think fully, I think we're going to be seeing numbers double within the next few weeks.
Yeah, Biden's approval rating is anywhere, depending on the poll, anywhere from 54 to 60%. And of course,
Yes.
those 60% are outlier,
Yes.
mumbo jumbo. We can't look at those seriously. But remember, Trump's highest approval rating ever was at 49%. He never hit that 50 mark. And even if we say that Biden's lowest approval rating at this point is 54, and that's an outlier. And you're right, but it's not just the bill, it's also the COVID, the vaccine rollout. Okay. It's how everything's going really, really well. And the economy and the weather's getting nicer. I know Biden has nothing to do with any of those, but yeah.
I do believe, I know here in Canada it was announced this week. I don't know how it is in the States. In Canada, it was announced this week that our unemployment rate is back to what it was just before the pandemic. So we're sitting at like a reset. We're sitting at where we were. I don't know how it is in the States, but isn't some credit also just to Biden not coming across like a dick? I mean, we can talk all we want about COVID-19 and the pandemic and the economy, and all of that is true, 100% and important. But man, the thing I hear from people, even people that I know as conservatives, is it sure is nice not to wake up in the morning and the news is about some batshit tweet in the middle of the night, or a feud, or an insult, or anger, or blame, or whatnot.
Absolutely.
And Biden comes out, and he talks, and he says, hey, maybe we're all good. Let's be good people. That's a lot better than like, these bastards over here. So, I mean, I think there's something to be said about that as well. However, I will say, I find it hilarious. I'm still hearing the Joe Biden has dementia, Joe Biden is senile thing. After, last week, he gave this wonderful address to the country that was so wonderful and heartfelt. And now I'm still getting people saying, the guy, he can't even talk. He blah, blah.
He doesn't know where he is. He's stuck in his basement. Yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that he hasn't done a press conference. At this point in Trump's presidency, Trump had done 5 press conferences. Obama had done 2. W had done 1. Clinton, I think, had done 2 himself. So
I did more than 2. Let me tell you that right here, Greg.
He'll do a press conference. He's not even in 3 months yet. And frankly, he's been doing stuff. So
that's just the point.
It's almost like if you don't tweet out batshit insane stuff at 2 a.m, you don't have to go to the press and explain it a day or two later.
I agree. But until he does these press conferences where people can ask him multiple questions on multiple things, like, hey, what do you think about China? What do you think about Cuomo? What do you think about, what kind of eggs did you have this morning? TV, person, woman, car, stuff like that.
2 weeks. 2 weeks. I'll give you 2 weeks. He's done one, I'll bet you.
Okay, awesome. That's a bet I want to lose. I'm looking forward to it. I will bet.
You don't want to lose it because we're betting $20,000.
I was going to bet that rash that's developed in an uncomfortable place. You get it. You can have it.
I've had that rash myself. I got to tell you right here, Greg, and I don't wish it upon anybody.
That's why I'm betting it.
We don't want to do anything rash, but we do want to move on to thank and say hello to our sponsor, BetterHelp.com, who has been sponsoring the More Perfect Union all of 2021, and we're excited about that. And we want to welcome them back because BetterHelp.com is the online therapy website that helps you identify what's holding you back in your life and helps you begin to achieve your goals.
That's right, Buttercup. BetterHelp will match you with your own licensed professional therapist. How's that? Connect in a safe and private online environment, which is very convenient, especially for those of us that get a little antisocial and maybe don't want to leave the house. You can start communicating with your therapist in under 24 hours. And just as a little side note, I haven't announced this before, but not only do I talk about BetterHelp.com here, I'm also a customer.
Nice.
There you go.
Nice. If you keep calling me Buttercup, I don't think I'll need BetterHelp. Plus, it's more affordable than traditional.
No!
It's more affordable than traditional counseling, and financial aid is available, and that's better than most colleges. And
do you have to pass the SAT?
And you don't need the SAT.
No, okay, good.
Both of you guys. And they have a broad range of experts available in different therapy areas and modalities. Experts who, one, know what the word modality means, and who may not be locally available in your area. And this is my favorite part. As a More Perfect Union listener, you'll get a 10% off of your first month by visiting our sponsors.
So join over 1 million people who have taken charge of their mental health. Again, that's BetterHelp, HELP.com/moreperfect. That's our promo code. We're more perfect. And if you go to BetterHelp, you'll be a more perfect person too. So this week, the GOP continued its assault on voting rights. I think there's like 36 states that either have GOP-led legislatures and or GOP governors. And in about 22 of them, they're already trying to roll back voting rights with ridiculous laws that are only meant to downplay and dissuade minority and black voting.
The things that they are doing, like no excuse mail-in voting, is something where you actually have to prove why you need mail-in voting instead of just saying, I just want to mail-in vote. So you have to say, I cannot be at the polls this day for a certain reason. I will be out of town.
I can't get off work. I can't.
Work's not an excuse.
Really? You can't actually use that?
You can't. By federal law, work has to give you an hour, 1 hour to go vote.
Yeah, and everybody can go vote, stand online, and get through the poll in an hour, sure.
Right.
And you know what they're doing? I think this is in Georgia. I'm sure you guys heard about it. They're making it illegal, it's a misdemeanor, for anyone to give water or food, pizza, anything like that, to people waiting online. Because in some of those places where they purposely limit the number of polling places so the lines are longer because they wanted people give up and leave. They're trying to make it more uncomfortable for people to wait it out for 3, 5, 7 hours.
Yeah.
Someday they're going to make it illegal to leave to go to the bathroom and come back to your place in line. That's how crazy these
You just
people
gave
are.
them an idea. I promise you
Yeah.
that they weren't thinking about that until they're like, hey. And this is the thing I keep saying over and over and over again. I don't understand it. Americans constantly talk about their rights, their rights, their rights, their freedoms, their freedoms, their freedoms. Voting should be easy, and it should be abundant. It should be something that is encouraged, made easy, made quick, and made efficient. It is probably the most important right that you have in America.
It's the only right that counts.
Yeah.
Everything else is dependent on that.
And it is fascinating to me to watch people arguing, the same people who argue that it should be easier, and I get it, it's a false equivalence, it's a different right. But the same people who argue about how easy it should be to get a gun want to talk about how we should make it really difficult to vote. And it all comes back to one party has realized that the fewer people vote, the better chance they have of winning.
Well, that's something else. I mean, the same party, rather than try to increase the voters by, giving them
Appealing to them?
appealing to the voters, has decided that why don't we just cut their ability to vote and we'll win. I mean, that's shady AF.
Well, that's been their strategy since at least 2016, if not before that.
Oh, so that's the Southern strategy at the very least.
And the way they rationalize it to themselves is, I've heard this phrase this week, they're trying to increase the quality of voting. That's what they call it. Oh, we're going to increase the quality because if people have to show more documentation, or we're reducing the ability of people to vote by mail, we're increasing the quality of the vote, which makes no sense at all.
No, that's a really nice way of saying those people without
Right.
saying it. We don't want those people voting. That's what they're trying to say. When I talk about that voting needs to be easy, I really do mean it needs to be easy. And I can't stand it when I hear people talk about how voting should be an honor and it should be a privilege and it should be esteemed. No, it should be very basic. It should be very easy. And for those out there who are listening who will go, well, what about illegals and blah, 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 blah. First of all, if you really think there's that many illegals trying to vote who could change an election, you're out of your mind. But secondly, that's just not something that actually happens. Illegals don't actually turn out to vote. This all comes down to wanting totally eligible, legal American citizens, not wanting them to vote. That's what it all comes down to.
Okay, so moving on, this is also a sad week in that we're celebrating another anniversary this week, or we did last week, the 1-year anniversary of the murder of Breonna Taylor. And I did use the word murder because that's what I think it was.
Oh, that's what it was. I mean,
Yeah.
Straight up.
So among the developments this week, the George Floyd family reached a record settlement with the state of Minnesota, is it, that he was
Yeah.
in? Minneapolis, Minnesota?
Yes.
And the locality there. And they're picking a jury in the Derek Chauvin trial, and he is on trial for 2 counts of murder, 2nd degree and 3rd degree, and 1 count of manslaughter. And you know what? I'm getting weak-kneed. I think this guy may get acquitted. I think they may not be able to get 12 to convict.
I mean, there's video. I mean,
There's video, and, for a year, even Trump said it was a bad police homicide. And I just have a bad feeling, based on history, the prosecution seems to be struggling a little bit, and I'm just getting the sense that they're not as confident with their case as we all think they should be.
Do not be fooled, because people really don't like to convict law enforcement. They don't. And This is not me taking a pro or con stance. I'm not saying he should or shouldn't be found guilty. People don't like to do it. Just like it's unlikely for women to be convicted of murder. People don't like to sentence women to murder. This is true, by the way, everyone, statistically. And they don't like to convict law enforcement. They just don't. And, we can talk about institutionalized racism, very real. We can talk about, the blue wall of silence, very real. We can talk about all that. But whenever there's a police officer on trial for anything, and it's debatable, and we've seen people debate this as if it's up in the air, right? Juries don't like to convict them.
And to make matters even more difficult on everyday citizens who are being pulled over by police, the state of Kentucky, their Senate, passed a bill this past week that will make it a crime to insult a police officer to the point of the police officer getting violent. So they're going to make it illegal for you to say something that motivates the police officer to beat the shit out of you.
Well, so that would be during a riot or during anything in a protest.
Are you sure about that?
Yeah, I'm almost pretty sure that if you come up to a police officer and start screaming in their face, they are allowed at that point to then use pepper spray or anything like that. The other thing about that law is they're allowed to determine what is a riot, and the determination of what is a riot has been lowered significantly. So, and we've seen this before where police officers have said, looks like we've got a riot. Let's start emptying the pepper spray. When literally it was people walking down the streets, talking, maybe yelling and chanting, but there was no damage. There was no rocks being thrown. There was nothing. And then they just unloaded with their pepper spray. This was what this law was for, so that they could just clear streets whenever they wanted. It would give police discretion to cause violence.
And you know what the outgrowth of this is going to be? The upshot is we will no longer be able to call movie comedies a laugh riot because we don't want to set up the situation where a police officer can then get violent.
I also have to think that, I don't know, but I have to think this is unconstitutional. I have to think there's going to be a challenge to it, and it's unconstitutional. You're allowed to give the finger to the police. A lot of people don't realize that. That this is, you have rights when it comes to the police. You absolutely have the right of expression.
Oh yeah. There's a lot to do with, the history of the police union and the power of the police union.
Oh, police unions are the biggest problem, frankly, in my opinion.
Right.
Police unions, and I'm a union person. I am one of the biggest defenders of unions that you'll ever meet. But police unions, they do something different than what normal unions do. Normal unions negotiate working conditions. Police unions negotiate who can murder whom and get away with it.
Yeah.
Right. Police unions are the ones who say things like, well, if there's a shooting, you can't talk to the officer for 2 days. Or, you can't talk to, or they'll say things like, there's all sorts of laws to protect the officer, not to find out the truth, not to find out these things. It's to protect the officer. And if you don't like it, you know what? We still have the right to go on strike. Not like, any other civil servant or any protected status. Police unions still have the right to go on strike, and they always carry that to be able to push these laws, which are ridiculous. There's all sorts of great books on police unions, which are horrifying.
You know what really made this a difficult area for me? Because, look, we're all pro-police in that when we need to be protected, when our shit is on the line, we like police there.
Yeah.
And most police do a valuable and wonderful job. Most police are heroes, okay? So I want to make that, my opening statement. But you know what? It went really bad for me? Right after Bill de Blasio was elected, and he was speaking at, I think, the funeral of a police officer who had been murdered in the line of duty. And hundreds, if not thousands, of New York City police officers in uniform, on duty, turned their backs on the mayor of New York City. And I'm going to curse now. Who the fuck were they to turn their backs on the mayor of their city? I don't care what they think of him personally. That took it too far. That set a kind of an attitude that the police have more of a say in the running of a city than the mayor and then the people. That was what tipped me a little bit away from this blue adoration that some people have. And frankly, it's very big here. I have some neighbors who are in the police. They are great people. I love them to death, and I believe that they are great police officers. But not everything that has a badge on it and not everything that is done in the name of police departments is essentially correct.
Well, I mean, one of the problems is in what you said, and that it was, you said, the police are heroes. One of the mistakes we've made, not just with the police, but in our society, is making occupations heroic.
Heroic, yes.
By definition.
Good point.
Most police officers, most cops are not heroes. That doesn't mean they don't have a perfectly respectable, admirable job. I think they absolutely do. It's a perfectly admirable, respectable, necessary job. But that doesn't mean that every cop is a hero. But it is that deifying of them, that turning the job itself into heroism that has made the police unions so powerful. And it's what's made it so powerful to the point where they can turn their backs on the mayor of New York City, like you said. And that is one reason why also juries don't like to convict cops.
There you go. And there is one jury that likes to convict, and that is the jury of public opinion when they're talking about the royal family. So how is that for a segue?
Good segue. Well done, you. Well done, you.
So Harry and Meghan did their big interview with Oprah last week or whenever it was. I didn't watch it, but of course everybody heard about some of the highlights. Greg, what was your take on it?
So, we talked a little bit about this on our Facebook Open Fire, which we invite everyone to do because it's awesome. But I did watch it. I am not a huge royal fan. What do the kids say? Stan them. But for this one, I did. This is not a question of their story and their journey and what they've been through is not a question of just your average royal watching. This was a question of them calling out systemic racism in a group that is a taxpayer fronted group. And to be quite honest, the royal family has been a racist, group for hundreds of years. And, this was important that finally someone said this. So I think it was something we should all be looking at,
Okay. I mean, it's no surprise to me that a 95-year-old woman who's lived her whole life being called Your Highness has some rather provincial attitudes towards race and minorities, but I guess that's a big scandal to them.
People really do love following the royals, but it wouldn't have to be the royal family. If you were to tell me anyone that I know is in a mixed marriage and their 90-year-old relatives are having a hard time with it, I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
And now understand, I'm not in any way excusing the racism of the royal family. I'm just saying I'm not surprised. But it's not even that it's because they're the royals. I can find somebody 90 years old 10 blocks from me right now that probably thinks the same way. So I'm not surprised.
Oh, look, it wasn't the shock. It wasn't the surprise. It wasn't that. It's the fact that they are the symbol of a country. It's the fact that taxpayers pay for a lot of their shit. And I know they are super rich. Okay. But the fact of the matter is that taxpayers, and even though I am not a citizen of England, but Canada still doesn't Canada still have the Queen on their money?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
I mean,
yes.
you should be pissed that you got this old racist bitch on your money.
Well, people are talking about it in Canada. People are talking about it. I refrain from it. I don't want to talk about my former coworker, Meghan Markle, quite that way. I don't want to discuss things with her. Of course, people know that I was on the TV series Suits with Meghan Markle. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I did not know that, actually.
Yes, indeed. Season 2. You can see me in season 2.
All right.
Yes. Okay. Yes. Let's get back on point.
But that is the point, Kevin. That is the point, Kevin. The point is I feel for my former coworker, and I am not surprised with the struggle that she and her husband have had to endure. But I mean, seriously, is anyone really surprised? I heard about this shock of it all, and I go,
Here's what I don't understand. There are many things I don't understand. I'll be the first to admit that. If they knew what they were going to discuss going into this, it's not like Oprah asked questions and they went, "Oh, well, I never thought about that, but now that you ask," they knew what the message was. If this was so important to the British kingdom, why did they do it on an American network with an American interviewer? If they felt that this was a message that they wanted to get out to their countrymen, they should have done it on one of their own networks with one of their own interviewers. I do not understand why they had to come over here to CBS, I believe it was, and do an interview with Oprah Winfrey to get that message across.
What are you, Piers Morgan's publicist now?
No, well, his issue was about the royal family. I'm talking about why did they have to do it the way they did it? It clearly was for international TV ratings, not to make a political or a sociological or a cultural point.
Wow, man! First of all, they live in L.A. They live in L.A. So it was faster, quicker,
but
easier.
They're talking about the royal family. And believe me, the Sun would have sent over a video team and a reporter to do the interview.
Yeah, and who would have got more publicity? Some reporter from the Sun, or wait for it, Oprah Winfrey?
Well, that's my point. They did this to make a media moment, and frankly, it just doesn't impress me. Again, like Ward said, I'm not forgiving the racism in the royal family. Obviously, that's horrible, but the whole thing to me just smacked of kind of commercial media hype.
Well, let me also say this, though, in their defense. Now, I don't know a whole lot about British media personality, right? I mentioned Piers Morgan because he has his hang-up with Meghan Markle, okay? And that came out in the news this week, okay? But there's also something to be said about, we aren't talking about the Today Show. We aren't talking about 60 Minutes. We're talking about Oprah. Now, yes, Oprah's American, but you're talking about one of the most famous celebrities in the world, known for doing interviews that are compassionate, full of empathy, and not attack interviews, right? So with all I know, there's not the British equivalent. Right, I don't know who the Oprah Winfrey of England is or Britain is.
Mr. Bean.
Rowan Atkinson, right? But maybe one reason it wasn't even about the hype or blah, blah, blah. It was about, we know Oprah's not going to attack us. We know Oprah's going to be there as our friend in this. You see what I'm saying? So yeah, we could say American or whatever, or the ratings. That's true. But at the same time, if you're looking to give a tell-all interview to somebody who's going to be cool with you, Oprah Winfrey is probably your best choice, right?
Okay. And with that, we want to thank everybody for listening to this extended portion or this extended special episode of the More Perfect Union, episode 299, which means that what is next week's episode?
300.
300 of these suckers we're going to be doing if we make it to next week.
Sparta!
If we don't get canceled.
This is Sparta! 300.
And next week, to celebrate the big 300, we may even look into doing a live video episode. We have to check into the technology to see whether we can handle it, but we'll let you know. So keep an eye on our Facebook pages and Open Fire to find out whether we're doing that. Well, we made it to 299, and we want to thank everybody. Please follow us on Twitter at MPU Podcast and on Instagram at MPU Fan Club. Boy, we've got to update that page. We have to do some updating there. And don't forget to share our link on your Facebook timeline so your friends and enemies can discover us as well. We don't just want your friends, we want your enemies listening as well. And with that, this is a big week for Greg because you're getting your second COVID vaccine. You will be impervious.
Oh, yeah.
Impervious to COVID-19.
Yeah, I'm not hanging out with you guys anymore. I'm going to have real friends. Screw you guys.
mean you've only been doing this online because it's safe?
Oh, yeah. Well, once I get my second vaccine, I'll be, out in the real world. I'll be, driving in convertible with all my, 70 and 80-year-old friends, and we'll be like, screw you kids. Be hitting mailboxes with bats and